Hello, my name is Russell Gomersall. I'm a BP Experts partner, and for over 14 years we have been focusing on business process management and process-driven business transformations. We work with a lot of different tools, but today I'd like to talk about SAP Signavio and how you can enhance the reporting and analysis capabilities of SAP Signavio by using Neo4j and KNIME. These are both open source tools, and in the course of this video I want to show you the standard built-in reporting capabilities, then jump over to the actual solution, how you can connect Neo4j and KNIME up to SAP Signavio to enhance the reporting capabilities, and what actually are the inbox capabilities of these tools to get more sophisticated reports, and show this in some practical examples in the tool. So first point is, let's just dig into the SAP Signavio. So I guess that for the people watching this video, I do expect that they know SAP Signavio, very well known BPM modeling tool, documentation tool for processes and beyond, especially now that they've been acquired with SAP. It's a highly pivotal tool in conducting, say, the HANA journey, the cloud journey. And you build up a process repository with a lot of diagrams, BPMN format, which is a standard BPM format. And you also link a lot of these artifacts around your transformation and the models, for example, the activities, the processes, but your transactions, your risks. All these are managed as dictionary items in a library. So typically we know from experience that when these repositories grow, they need a lot of housekeeping. So also here there are certain reports built into Signavio. Here they are Excel exports, and one of them, this is a view on what is provided out of the box as reports. And one of them specifically, the modeling conventions, checks the diagrams on how the adherence to certain conventions, which is already good for the basic quality of the diagrams. And the other one is the process model metrics, where you can have an in-depth look, and this is the Excel you can see down here. You can see an analysis for each diagram, what model type it is, the amount of elements that have been modeled, edges, forks. And here this is something for typical housekeeping relevant. You see if the sub-processes you've modeled in a BPMN, if they've been linked to sub-processes, and if some of them haven't been linked yet, then you see that here in the navigation through the collaboration hub, this would, let's say, end in a dead end. And these are typically things that you would want to then cover and take care of, and then identify the diagrams and link them up. You also see then dictionary item links, so here you can check out how many process steps you have and if each of them has been linked to a dictionary item, or if they're more or less just single diagram elements without a link to the dictionary, which is something that to keep the database, let's say, consistent, and also from a, let's say, a current copy of referring to same items that are maintained only once point, you want to have all your objects linked to dictionary items to manage them properly. So there is this report. However, the issue is that typically in the dictionary items, you can configure according to your own methodology cross-references between dictionary items. Yeah? So here a dictionary item, for example, a process, can have a maintained process group. Yeah? This is very important if you are looking at the overlays in BPMN in Signavio, the collaboration hub. I'll show you an example in a second. Then these need to be maintained. And here the only way of actually managing your dictionary items is by exporting via Excel all your dictionary items. And here you get an Excel with the tab per category. And here you see that also the attributes, if they've been maintained, if they haven't been maintained, if it's a text or if it's a dictionary item GUID, and in which documents, in which diagrams they occur. So to some extent you see you have two different Excels. Both of them give some information, but if you really want to do an in-depth like query, then you're going to have to decompose this Excel. As soon as you have a change in repository, you're going to have to download and update the Excel. And as soon as you start adding custom attributes to your dictionary items, then here any detailed analysis, say for example, reporting on a certain status of a process according to your, let's say, methodology, this is something that's already going to be very cumbersome doing this via Excel. So this is where then our solution kicks in. So what we do here, and this is also very important, that in Signavio you do have an API. However, over this you can only extract the dictionary items in more or less a similar format to the export file, also then again as a JSON, and the diagrams also more or less in a BPMN format, so an XML structure that is standardized. However, then here the relations of, for example, objects to which GIDs and dictionary items, this is something that you have to then more or less parse and connect yourself. This is what we do. So we take this raw data from Signavio, and in our REST API, which we can access over REST APIs, we then fill up a graph database. For each dictionary item, we create an object with its attributes and their relations to diagrams and the relations to other dictionary items according to how you have built up your meta model in Signavio. And this graph database now, this is something that you can then, with a very sophisticated query language and via REST APIs, you can connect up to, for example, other reporting tools like Power BI or Tableau. You can connect it up to ChatGPT to give it like an augmented generation of answers. And you can use it for certain analysis in KNIME. There are also built-in tools, and this is something I'd like to focus on when I show you with the practical examples. But now we are going to jump into Signavio, and I will there explain you what I've just explained around the reporting items and the limitations and the practical examples that we will then be following up in the Neo4j. Welcome to part 2 of this video, and here in the second part I wanted to show you the situation in Signavio and how the way you maintain the repository in Signavio leaves open questions around the standard reporting. So what we have here now is the collaboration hub. I'm going to focus on this for my presentation, not to make things too complicated. And we see here that we have organized this repository according to a project. So we're talking about a big transformation. And here we have a collaboration hub where we have organized our repository according to streams. Now here, according to the best practices, I can jump down a level in deeper. And here you see that I've created a map for this stream, for the supply chain, where on the one hand I have a certain like hierarchy and end-to-end scenarios. So here I have then a collapse sub-process, and if I click on it, you see that there is an underlying process model. I can already see the preview here of the link diagram. I can see object attributes, and these objects are actually maintained in a dictionary item. So here that's why you have this reference to go to the dictionary item page. You see all the attributes and you see the link, a sub-process is linked. On the other hand, next to this, before I drill down, we also on the left hand side have process groups. This is just a functional collection of processes where again, if I click on here, I see that I have like a grouping of processes around the functional area transportation management. As you will also see, I have here a dictionary item that is being maintained. What you also see though is that for the sake of this project, where there was a lot of change management, which was being which was being undertaken, and there was a lot of like associating business roles to certain areas. So here, this dictionary item transport for process groups, yeah, we have assigned business roles. Now, this is not per standard here, but the convention said one or several business roles are to be assigned to the process group. This can be used for later classifying the training, coordinating the training, or identifying who is to be involved when certain changes happen. Then this is something that where the standard, let's say, meta model has been extended, and also in the process group dictionary item, there are change impacts from this project that have been identified, also linked, yeah, so maintained as a dictionary item link, maintained on this object. Now, it's not about let's questioning, say, the overarching methodology that this project has been following. It's just about using the technicality of enhancing data by building up relations between different dictionary items, objects, by managing them in the conventions. Also, this is something we're there. Now, let's go back to our linked process. If I go down a level deeper and I open this process, then also here, as mentioned, this is a value chain of processes and interfaces to other end-to-end scenarios. And here, also a very important feature of Signavio is that you have the overlays, so you can see if any IT systems have been assigned to this process, or any impacts, again, change impacts have been assigned to these processes, or which process groups are assigned. Yeah? And again, so where do these come from? These are, if I click on this process, I see that there is a dictionary item, and the process group is a maintained attribute of this process, which is then visible in the overlay. Yeah? And this is not a free text, of course. This is a reference to a different process group. So ultimately, if you use this, you have some very valuable information. I can see change impacts that have been linked to my processes. I see that which process group they belong to, and I can at any time jump there to the diagram and see the collection of processes around this. So this is helpful for the project to have like this interlinked information at their fingertips. Now, despite the fact that this now is well maintained, it is still for the governance organization a challenge to check if you have a bigger team of maintaining these processes, updating dictionary items to ensure that everything is consistent. And the answer cannot be that you are clicking through each diagram to see if they're consistent, specifically if you have certain situations where you want to manage then, does this diagram have the same amount of objects as we have dictionary items in the repository. There is no out-of-the-box solution for this. Other tools, this is something else, but we are talking about SAP Signavio here. So this is where then these two aforementioned reports would come in. You can download all the the dictionary items as Excel. You can download certain reports on the diagrams, and here you can then work around with the Excels to try to identify duplicates by filtering the Excel and or sorting it and doing some other checks. But as I said, this is quite cumbersome. This is where, going forward into the next stage of the presentation, I would like to show you how we extract all this data into a graph. And in this graph, we can then do dedicated queries to certain questions I have around the Signavio database concerning housekeeping, governance, and consistency. And you will see that there are some great answers. Before we go there, though, just want to jump back, because then we can immediately see one of these issues that we have here. I think we can go into one of these process groups. Just hang on. If I open one of these up, then by looking on this, I can immediately see all the processes that belong to the process group sourcing direct. I see in the overlay the process groups that are maintained, and here down here I see one of them where this overlay doesn't pop up. So here, looking at the variants, I see, aha, this hasn't been maintained. This has been created, it's been placed on the diagram, but if I go here to the actual attributes, it hasn't been maintained. So if I theoretically go here, then I see the process group is, I can see it here. There is then the process group here hasn't been maintained. So this is where the editor environment. So long story short, yes, if you go to the diagram, you can directly see that there something is not quite right. On the other hand, I haven't checked all the others where it has been maintained if the right one has been maintained. There's no automatic check on that. So principally going down here and say, where's the process group? And I say sourcing direct. Okay, well done. Now you're not going to click on each of them to check this. And of course the Excel download, you could then filter then these according to the diagram they've been assigned to, and also then look then if the attribute sourcing direct is according to the name of the diagram that it's been assorted to. But doing that in Excel is something quite painful. So besides the point that you don't want to click on every diagram to see if the right objects have been, if they have been maintained, and look at it each in detail to see if the right one has been consistently mapped. This is something you don't want to do in the tool. You want to do it with reports, and the Excel reports from Signavio are very cumbersome to do it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but some questions would be really tricky to do, and keeping this up to date with the dynamic team, changing the data every day, it's something that is near to impossible to do it properly. This is then where our solution comes into play. What you see here is now the technical setup. I've mentioned before, we have an API with Signavio that we can use to extract the dictionary items in a very similar format as we receive them in Excel, just as JSON. And we additionally can extract the diagrams in a BPMN format as JSON. It's kind of like wrapped differently over REST APIs. We take this data and we interpret it in the way similar to the Excel that we create objects for each of the categories, and any relations by having dictionary item links between these dictionary items are then created as relation between these objects. And additionally, we import all the diagrams with the related links to the dictionary items, similarly to what you also see then as a, let's say, reversely in the dictionary item export. Okay, so next chapter, I'm going to stop here for a short break, and then we'll be jumping directly into Neo4j, and I'll show you what the result looks like and how we can do some nice queries to solve these problems. Part 3. So now we are in Neo4j and in the dedicated Neo Bloom Explore component. So after we run our script or the service to actually import the data, we, as I mentioned, have created objects for each of these category items of the dictionary, or dictionary items. And here we see then, we have then processes, streams, scenarios, scenario clusters, so all elements that we have before seen in Signavio. Also the dictionary items for test documents, training documents, KDDs, process groups, domains. So a lot of objects that we haven't shown you all. There's quite a lot we have here. Now the nice thing about Bloom is that we have the possibility of formatting the color, shape, even the icon of each of these objects. And we can do some rule-based formatting, for example here, to differentiate diagrams. If they are scenario diagrams, I've just checked if there's a prefix of a domain, and based on that then I have a different formatting. You'll see this later on in the example. So here the diagrams are all diagrams, but there is the possibility of having a rule-based formatting to differentiate between different kinds of diagrams. This could be the model type, or maybe something that according to your naming convention you can identify. This is something that you can also do. Even on an attribute like status, you could say, for example, grayed out or make it red. Now let's dig in and let's just look at how we have imported some, and maybe we just then go to the group and just do a very simple query where we have a query all groups. We have the possibility of then selecting and filtering the group by certain attributes. But let's just first of all have a look at all the process groups we have. Here, if I select one and let's say I deselect, I dismiss, let's say I dismiss other nodes. So I have this for myself. I can then directly inspect this, and here exactly identical all the objects, attributes from the Signavio have been imported, and I also have a deep link into this Signavio. Anytime I want to see this dictionary item to verify the import, I have this as well, or maintain it anyway. Now coming to the actual idea. So what we have as well is we see that this dictionary item is referred to in 16 diagrams. Yeah. So this is these are the relations of this 16 diagrams where there is an object there that relates to this process group. We also see that there are these business roles. So I have 16 business roles. I showed that in the example before, that there are certain business roles that are assigned to process groups. Sourcing direct. There have been a lot of business roles identified in the project that have been assigned to this. And I can then expand further, and let's have a look what else I have here. And here I see that I have processes related to this process group. That's exactly what we were actually expecting. And we also see that there are certain documents, some training documents, I think here. Let's have a look at one of them. We have a document, master data exercise, commodity code table doc. So this looks like some training documents that have also been assigned to this process group. Now, ultimately, I also have a change impact related to this process group. So here I can see everything that if I go to the actual item myself, then you would say, hey, that's simple, but that's what I can see. If I go here, then I can see all the business roles. I can see, yes. Oh, wait a minute. I can't see all the processes, because to see which processes refer to the process group, I would have to look at each and every process. So I can see the diagrams. That's something identical to what we just saw. I also see the directly maintained business roles. What I don't see, however, though, is the reverse view from the processes, which processes are actually having a reference towards this process group. Yeah? So here, already the way that we see this information here, I already see the, let's say, the reverse direction of relations of objects that are actually referring to the sourcing direct. So this is already in itself valuable, but this is something where we want to go into queries to do some consistency checks. And this is where I'm going to, for now, jump into the query environment. Here you have an environment, you can directly submit queries similar to SQL, but dedicated around GraphQL, and here in the case of Neo4j, it's called CypherQL. And for example, let's take this one example. I want to match all processes, yeah, where not there is a relation with a group. So where the attribute group hasn't been maintained. Please return the name of the process and the URL. And if I submit this, then I immediately see that I have here 10 processes where the process group was not maintained. Now, if I'm not quite sure, I'll find exactly the one that I was actually looking at. But there was one around check service notification. Let's just look into this one. And here I already see that there is no process group maintained. And if I go into the edit stage again, then I will see, yes, the actual process group hasn't been maintained. And best case, I could correct it. So that's one view that is definitely something that ultimately, I guess you could do via Excel in the standard reports, but that's quite a nice trick. Now let's have a look in the other way around. Now I want to look at a consistency check. So here, a bit of a more complicated query. I'm going to get all process groups, and I'm going to get all processes that are related to this group. Yeah? On the other hand, I'm going to get the diagram, which has the same name as the group, so which is the dedicated, in the collaboration hub, the visible diagram for the process group. So this is where they match, and then I count the amount of processes that are linked to the group, and I count the amount of total tasks of this diagram, and then if they're not the same, if they differ here, then return a list of differences with the counts. If I execute this, then I see here all the diagrams and, let's say, process groups where there is the deviance between the number of tasks and the number of processes here. Yeah, and there's two cases. One of them that I have more dictionary items than I actually have on the diagram. So the dictionary items were created and not placed on the diagram. But I also have other cases where, for example, and this is the example we were looking at, where I have a process group, I have an object, but the object placed there hasn't had the attribute process group maintained. So that's why the count here is higher than it is here. So these two quite simple examples just to show how standard consistency checks in your conventions can be checked. So you could check any attribute on, let's say, its count, if it's been maintained. But of course, using this query, you can also then create an aggregate of information that you want to then pump into Power BI, for example, to aggregate over the status to see how much percentage of your processes have been published, or they have a certain status, how well they've been maintained, if they have descriptions. If they don't have any descriptions, you can do dedicated queries to see which change impact which roles and which processes these roles are assigned to. So you can do, some much more sophisticated queries and analysis. In the next chapter of this video, I would like to jump into KNIME, where I show how simple you can, say, set up an analysis tool to, let's say, pipeline certain queries or analyses into Power BI. Yeah? And this as an additional form of not having to directly work in Neo4j, which is like this with this visual explore functionality in the query. Where you could, of course, also download the results of these queries as CSV, but how you can use KNIME to do further aggregation analysis of this data, or just use it to extract the data, transform it, and load it into a tool such as Power BI. So in this final part of the video, I would like to show you KNIME, a fantastic data analysis tool that you can also use for ETL tasks, or extracting, transforming data and loading it into other systems. In the previous Power part of the video, I presented you some of the queries that can be submitted to analyze the graph database. And here I would like to just show an example in KNIME how on a low code base you can connect up the Neo4j database with Power BI. And as a baseline here, you have these little nodes. Yeah, and it's really worth checking out KNIME as an open source platform for doing data analysis and transformation. And what you have here, you have some standard connectors for Neo4j and reader writers, so in both directions. And this one, you can check out the configuration. And here you see I've done a very static query that you may recognize because it's the one that we had in the previous video chapter, where we check out the consistency of the amounts of processes related to a group and the amount of tasks on diagram, and then we return then the name and the numbers and the URL. So this is the way you can configure this node. You also have dedicated functions to statistical Neo4j analytics. You automatically, after you've connected up, see your node labels and your relationship labels. So you definitely here can also start creating your own queries. But typically, what I've just done, I've done the validation of the queries in the Neo4j, and then I copy over the queries here. But principally, you could also ensure that connected to the database, you have here the relations and the nodes in the right format. Now, this node is processed and then returns then a result, which you can also check here. So this, similar to what we saw in the query result, I see that then internally in this tool, now I have submitted the query, and I receive back the data, which is stored in a certain table. I've just to do some form of transformation, have done the most simplest form. I've included a math formula, which I use just to calculate the difference between these counts, which I hadn't done formally in that query. So a very simple task here. You can then process the columns of the table according to a certain schema, here according to some standard mathematical functions. And I write the delta, or the absolute difference between these two. I write them into a table, into a known column. So here, after I execute this, I also have a result that I have an additional column, which is then the difference between both of these columns. Now, I want to feed this into Power BI. Here they have a Microsoft Authenticator node, which can be used to connect up to your Microsoft environment. And here we have a send to Power BI node, where I can then define which dataset name and table name should be updated or created new. This is something you can set here. You can select existing datasets and update them, append rows or override them. Here you have the full control over the dataset. For the sake of simplicity, I've said delete and create new datasets. So just to exemplify that there is a low-code platform that can connect up to Neo4j and also connect up to whatever other environment you want to actually then write into. Also, there's connectors for Tableau or ClickView, or just you also have the possibility in KNIME to maybe reformat the data, push it out into Excel, or even make your own visualization in KNIME. This is all possible. And you can also then save and export these workflows for them to be scheduled, so you can have them regularly running automatically. And by this, automating your reporting, let's say, process or your pipeline of tasks, and send something to Power BI. As very simple example. Also, as a result, I'd just like to jump in to a very simple formatting of what I've done with the data set. So now in the Power BI, I have this data set. Based on this data set, I have created a very simple report where I have a table, a grid, where I have now the delta of these two numbers that I've calculated visible. So I can see here, health and safety environment, something really is not good here. And I've created like a conditional formatting where I have then the link as a column directly then as the URL. So I can directly click here and jump into the Signavio environment. So I can say, okay, what's happened here? Something is there's a big difference between what I have here maintained in the diagram and what has been maintained in the dictionary items. And I can inquire why this is so high. Yep. And okay, then just for the sake of it, some filtering possibilities over pie charts, so standard Power BI. But this video is not about creating Power BI dashboards, as you can obviously see. It's just to show the let's say the functionality of having a standardized script to export the Signavio data. Having this stored in the graph then gives you the possibilities of directly analyzing in the Neo4j database, or doing it externally by extracting the data in a standardized format into other tools. This can be directly processing in KNIME, or taking it a step further, providing the data to Power BI or any other tool to further consolidate it or analyze it. Yeah, so I think here our approach we took is to show, first of all, how much it makes sense to extract the data in a specific form, that you have it as a graph, which is really something you can report on, and it is a really open database. We use an open source tool, so there's no additional big license costs behind it. Highly performant, standardized approach where you have the full flexibility of bringing in your tools. And that's so far what we want to present. If you have any questions, then please love to hear your comments. Also, you can follow and subscribe to this channel to get more infos and more videos where we will go into more in details on alternative open source products, but also alternative show use cases for such solutions. And then also in the show notes there are other links to our company and related channels where we have other content. Thank you very much and take care.